Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Weckerly, and welcome to the Ready Living podcast, where each episode is designed to educate, inspire, and empower you to create the life you want. Thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe for free on your favorite platform. My guest today is Barb Varcl Smith. She is a trauma recovery educator, speaker, and therapist. Known for her practical systems-based approach to trauma recovery, she's the creator of the Ascendance Method, the Steps of Ascendance framework, and the concept of fake resilience. She is also the host of the podcast Way Out of Childhood Trauma. Her mission is to help people recognize the hidden survival patterns that shape their thoughts, behaviors, relationships, and identity in order to rewrite their story and move from survival to authentic living. Welcome, Barb.
Thank you for having me.
Before we talk about trauma and trauma recovery in a broader sense, I want to begin with your own story because it seems to inform so much of the work you do now. Since 2015, you've lived in Scotland, but you grew up in what was then communist Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic. Your parents were dissidents who stood in front of Soviet tanks when the Soviets and Warsaw Pact troops arrived to crush the 1968 Prague Spring. And because of that, your family experienced rejection, persecution, and poverty. You've described living in a one-bedroom apartment with your parents and two siblings, and sometimes even having to eat pasta sprinkled with sugar because there was no sauce. How did growing up in that environment shape the way you understand survival, safety, relationships, and your place in the world?
What I learned from that experience was that we have enormous ability to adapt. I would look back on my childhood and I would say that it was happy because my parents loved me. They didn't really recognize that all these things happened to me. Witnessing mom's accident when I was 4. Father did his best working, single parent of 3 children, wife in hospital, mom not present, so we have to take care of ourselves. The moments when he was taken away by the secret police and we didn't know when he come back. My sister was brought back because she was abused by her husband with a little child, not getting emotional support from anybody in society. All these moments lead to my fake resilience. I kept going, doing sports, school for talented children. Like I was often ill, sinusitis, then my joints giving up during sport, very painful dislocation of the hip. Told, you cannot exercise at all, otherwise you will end up in the wheelchair. But I keep going and I started riding horses because I believe that would work. Then when I turned 17, I just break down. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. We have headaches, we have joint pain, you have muscle pain. Everything is painful. And I was told, learn to live with that. I started learning and searching everything available, brain kinesiology, NLP, regression, everything what was possible to find, to learn. I was able, by mind and body connection, switch off the pain. And when I look back, I started realizing it's not about what happened to us. It's how we reacted to it. And that's totally changed my understanding of trauma. We can change how we react to it and we can restructure ourselves. I believe that recovery, it's not an endless process. We don't need to spend rest of our life in trauma responses or rest of our lives in recovering. We should get to that stage when we are here and now, not affected by the past, and start recognizing who we really are. Your childhood experience illustrates that it wasn't just one isolated event, but a prolonged environment of uncertainty and fear that resulted in your particular manifestations. And that raises a larger question about how trauma operates. We often think of trauma as something caused by a single dramatic event, but your story highlights how ongoing conditions, things like poverty or instability, fear, oppression, emotional suppression, can shape a person's development. If trauma is not simply the event itself, but the way we respond to an event, then the next question becomes, what does that response look like? You often say that people aren't broken, but rather adapting to situations in order to survive.
What are some of the most common survival patterns you see in people, and where do responses like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn fit into those?
We kind of flip the switch in us and we start living in survival mode. When we start looking on these trauma responses, fight and flight are about leaving the situation. Fight is taking the risk and go for it. Flight, avoid the risk and fly. But in any case, is going somewhere else. Freeze and fawn are about staying in situation. It's where children operate most because we force them to freeze. It's about avoiding it. And fawn, I'm going for it. I will play the little pet and I will survive. When we see fight mode, it could be being loud, being aggressive, being a rebel, somebody who is aggressive towards others or controlling. Flight mode, it could be using drugs, alcohol, just trying to avoid. I'm not here. I'm just running away from this reality. It could be leaving jobs, leaving the relationship, using porn, anything which makes us go somewhere else, mentally or physically. Freeze mode will be depression, anxiety. They don't want to interact with the world. They don't feel their purpose. They don't feel drive. And fawn, people pleasing, trying to adapt. And there is that fifth one, which I call fake resilience. We pretend that we function. Our life is not joyful. Our life is just numb. And we just keep going.
Some survival responses become so automatic that people begin judging themselves for them. For example, they may be struggling with shaming and asking, "What is wrong with me?" You suggest something different, however. You suggest asking, "What is this symptom trying to tell me?" How does changing the question from judgment towards ourselves to curiosity transform the way people understand themselves and their behavior?
Our recovery is starting with recognizing what we're actually doing. We need to recognize that our behaviors are driven by programs we created in our mind. Our mind actually doesn't do errors. Our mind is just functioning as we set it up, as we program it when we are little. But when we start realizing that it's what we set up, we can start changing. We are not able to connect. We are not unlovable. We are not unworthy. We just create this belief. When we start to be honest with ourselves, we can start seeing these patterns. It's helped me in the past, but it's not helping me anymore. We have to be willing to, on one side, face our demons, what's really happened, but also understand that it's not blaming somebody. It's not about that. It's about understanding ourselves. And when we do recognize what happened and when we start recognizing these patterns we created from it, we get to that stage of awareness and we can move forward from it. We can start releasing it and changing it. And that's the way out of trauma.
I liked something I came across in your work, which was a metaphor you use of life as a library of videos, which we can revisit as old stories and memories that we now see through a different lens of interpretation. We can take out a memory, we can put it back, but we don't have to identify with it unless we really find it valuable or useful. Healing isn't only about the individual. You also talk about how patterns can move through families. Ancestral trauma passes down through generations. How can somebody recognize whether a fear or a belief or behavior belongs to them personally or whether they've inherited it from previous generations?
We have two ways we inherit trauma. One is energetically through the ancestral bonds. It's really good to start looking back what happened to our ancestors. We can find that there was trauma, wars, inequalities, violence, and stuff like that, passing on in their behaviors, in their lack of care for children. I saw it in my family, and it's helped me to understand that my parents really tried their best, better than their parents. I start looking why my grandfather was so controlling. He survived total assault in Berlin during Second War, so his life was extremely harsh. His life changing 180 degrees from being the director of the big company to being slave. So when he come back, he become cold. I'm like, why are you crying? Be happy that you have the roof overhead. Because he was living in trauma. It's about seeing these patterns which we have, the misplacement, injustice, moral injuries, which we're passing on. Another stream of trauma is about how we see our parents. We're mimicking what they're doing, and we're living in that emotions they have, especially emotions of the moms. During pregnancy, the child is literally bathed in that emotion, soaking as a sponge, and then is born and just living it out. We can start realizing, is it mine or not?
This connects to your motto, break the cycle, change the world.
I strongly believe in the huge ripple effect. When I recovered, my son grew up in different way. I learned to listen to what he's saying. I react different to my husband. So my husband was able to recover from his childhood trauma because he get that space. He can have his own boundaries. So I think that when we change the one person, it's multiplying enormously.
You created a methodology that guides individuals through 4 structured stages of healing. Can you briefly describe those for us?
So step of ascendance are 4 stages which we need to go through when we want to get out of trauma fully. First is recognition, leading to the state of awareness. We know what's happened to us, we know what we created. The next one is release, leading to absolution. It's from the Latin word absolutus, meaning set free. We are not anymore affected by the past. We release it from the mind, we release it from the body. Many different ways how to do it. Somatic, breath work, hypnotherapy, regression, many different ways. And then we get into the third point, which is very underestimated, and that's grieving, regret. We need to really process that, look back on that library of our life, that unhealthy coping mechanism. And we will start seeing how our mind make this best decision in the time. And it takes time to process this regret and grieving, really process, maybe be angry about that, be sad about that, and get to the moment of acceptance when we realize, okay, it did happen, I cannot change it, but now I am here. Through this process, we reconnect with our self-love because the sadness is actually a teacher telling us what we wanted. When we speak about grieving and about sadness, it's not actually about past, it's about missed future. We're grieving that potential future, the relationship, jobs, opportunities. I have to accept that it's something which I wanted, but I cannot have that. And then it's coming to the last step. And when we're living in trauma responses, when we're living in survival mode, we really don't know who we are. Not really choosing career, not choosing partners, not choosing hobbies, not really choosing even clothes and colors, but just grabbing what is available. In that last stage, we go into what I call rediscovery. Rediscover ourselves, what I like, what I want, what character I want to be, what virtues I want to work on. Get to that stage of what I call ascendance, that stage when we are free. We are free to be ourselves. We are free to express our emotions. We are free to have our opinions. We are free to choose. We are free to be ourselves. That's the main difference. When we're living in trauma responses, we are not free. We're not choosing how we adapt. We're just trying to survive. But if we are in ascendance, we're choosing. We know why we're choosing it. We think about it. We feel it. We listen to our intuition. We're living out our purpose. We listen to our self-love, what is good for me. And that's completely different level of life.
Alongside that process, the 5 pillars of the self, those are inner strength, self-love, intuition, wisdom, and purpose. How can people begin strengthening these qualities in their everyday life?
It's really important to start with that inner strength, start with that restoration of the inner strength to where it's supposed to be. Have emotions, let them go out. Then you will realize that I feel lighter, I feel stronger, and now my self-love starts speaking to me what it is I want to do. Start listening to what we really need. If we show our truth and we start to be authentic, we start recognizing our purpose. And purpose can be anything. Purpose doesn't need to be something huge. Purpose can be binman, can be baker, can be farmer, can be teacher, can be doctor, can be anything. What is satisfy us inside, not expecting to be appreciated for it. Even intuition, we start really feeling these little nudges. This is right way for me. We start trusting it, that feeling, and it's a wisdom. Wisdom, it's about ability to turn the knowledge to practice, change the knowledge to applicable things. It's not age depending. We can have very wise children because they living in their 5 pillars of self fully. So it's not about age.
Once upon a time, you also trained as a landscape architect and even designed a private park. What lessons from designing living systems influence the way you think about human healing?
When you're planning the park or garden, you have 2 ways. When you're looking on some TV show about gardening, it's planned in the way that's immediately beautiful. It's filled with shrubs and trees and flowers, but it's not how the garden really grows. A lot of people don't understand that. But when you're designing park or bigger park, that park is designed with the vision how it will look in 15 years. It will grow and it will look even nicer next year. In 10 years, it will look like as it was designed. It's how we also functioning as people. Same way, if you put together things which are not growing together, they will start dying off. We are also system and we have different needs and we have different needs from others. And when we start seeing that we are all unique humans, each of us have different needs, then we start recognizing this kind of symbiotic, what we see in nature, that we need a tree to make the shadow and birds can live in it. When we realize our needs, we start seeing who can fulfill that need. It's where we start creating that symbiotic life in the world.
Many people live for years believing that their trauma, symptoms, or patterns are simply who they are and that they won't be able to heal. What would you say to them?
I would tell them that trauma doesn't define us. Trauma is not what creates our character. It's not what creates our temperament. It's not who we are. We adapt to survive. Quite often, you don't know who you are without trauma. You need to start finding it. But we all are supposed to be content, happy, and purposeful. They are not emotions. They are states of being. And if you are not in these 3 states, then you can get to them. First concrete step people can start doing is tell themselves, I love you. Then go exploring who you really are and start processing the past. Go and seek help. It's all starting with that belief that it's possible to change.
Where can people find you online to learn more about your work?
Best is probably on my website, which is your-steps.co.uk. We can guide them. We can give the tools. Trauma doesn't define us. We don't have to live like that to the rest of life.
Barb, thank you so much for having taken the time today.
Thank you.